Emotional appeal isn't a metric, Mr. Reeves.
3 hours earlier, the richest man on the block walked out of his own building.
Are you cold, sir? You need it more than I do.
Helen, pull every rejection.
In 48 hours, that $14 coat would save her son's life. But first, somebody was about to lose everything. Mama, that man's whole body is shaking. Can we help him? Maria, Elena Vasquez looked down at her son, then over at the bench. The man was hunched against the cold like he was trying to make himself smaller. February in West Hollywood wasn't supposed to be like this, but a freak Pacific storm had been dumping rain for 2 days, and the wind off Sunset was cutting through everything. She didn't think about it. She unzipped her own coat, a thin brown parka she'd bought at a Goodwill on Pico for $14, and walked it over to him. Her hands shook the second she let go. Now she was the cold one, standing there in just her waitress shirt and an apron that smelled like fried tortillas and lime. She smiled at him. "Stay warm, sir. You shouldn't be out here like this." The old man lifted his head. His hair was soaked flat against his scalp, and his eyes were the kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad day. He whispered something she almost didn't catch. "God bless you, miss." That coat had cost her $14 at a thrift store on Pico. The man wearing it now owned 78% of a 5-star hotel, 2 blocks behind them. A hotel worth $340 million. And in 48 hours, Maria Elena's 7-year-old son was going to need every cent of it to stay alive. Before we go any further, I have to tell you something. I almost didn't make this video. The story you're about to hear is one of those stories that sits with you. The kind that makes you look at strangers differently the next day. If you believe small acts of kindness still matter in this world, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Like the video. Share it with one person who needs it tonight. Because what happened next at that bus stop set off a chain of events that nobody saw coming. Least of all, the old man on the bench. His name was Keanu Reeves. 3 hours earlier, Keanu had been sitting at the head of a glass conference table on the 22nd floor of the Vermilion Crest Hotel. His name wasn't on the door. His name wasn't on anything. That was the whole point. 14 years ago, when he'd put up the money to buy the building, he'd done it through a trust named after his mother. The hotel made about $20 million a year in profit, and every dollar of it went somewhere most people would never guess. A quiet account that paid for chemotherapy, bone marrow transplants, hospital beds for children whose families had stopped sleeping. In 14 years, the trust had covered the full treatment of 2,847 kids with leukemia and blood cancers across America. Not one of them, not one of their parents, had ever known the name of the man writing the checks. Keanu had a reason. His sister Kim had fought leukemia for years. He remembered the waiting rooms. He remembered the way other parents in those rooms looked when the billing office came down the hall. He remembered one couple in particular. The woman maybe 30, the man younger, sitting across from him one Saturday in 1990-something, while Kim was in chemo. The man kept opening his wallet and counting the cash in it like the number was going to change. Keanu had wanted to say something, he hadn't. He'd made himself a promise back then. Quiet one, just for him. But the man sitting across from him at the conference table didn't know about any of that. Vincent was the CEO Keanu had hired 6 years ago to run the hotel. And tonight Vincent was leaning back in his chair with the kind of smile a man wears when he thinks he's already won. "Mr. Reeves," Vincent said, "I appreciate that you have a sentimental attachment to the trust. But the board has reviewed the financials, and we believe the foundation's grant approval process needs reform. Frankly, we're approving too many cases that don't meet rigorous criteria." Keanu was quiet. He had a way of being quiet that made other people keep talking. We've turned down a few applications this quarter that, on paper, looked compelling. But emotional appeal isn't a metric. We have a duty to be selective. The foundation's reputation depends on rigor. Without rigor, it becomes a slush fund. How many applications? Keanu said. Vincent's smile thinned. I don't have the exact number. Roland does, Keanu said. Roland was Roland Pemberton, the man whose name sat on the Foundation's board chair on paper, the man Keanu had trusted for 21 years. They'd met on a film set in Vancouver in 2004. Roland had been a production accountant. He had a daughter Keanu's sister had liked. He'd been at Keanu's mother's funeral. Right now, Roland was sitting at the far end of the table, looking at the napkin under his water glass, and he was not looking up. The vote went 6-1. Keanu against everyone. Vincent had a stack of bylaws printed out and bound in leather, and the bylaws said that a unanimous -1 vote could restrict the founder's day-to-day authority over the trust. Roland had drafted the bylaws himself 11 years ago. Keanu had signed them without reading them carefully because he'd trusted Roland. The meeting broke up at 6:15. Keanu didn't take the elevator down to the parking garage where his old gray pickup was waiting. He walked out the front of the hotel onto Sunset, past the valet stand, past the doorman who didn't recognize him because Keanu was wearing a black hoodie and a flat cap, and the doorman's eyes were trained on people who looked like money. He walked east. The rain started halfway down the block. By the time he sat down at the bus stop on La Brea, his hoodie was soaked through to the skin. His jeans were heavy with water. He'd been worth, on paper, somewhere north of $380 million for almost a decade. Right now, he was a 61-year-old man on a metal bench shaking from the cold, and a 7-year-old kid was walking toward him. That kid's name was Daniel. His mother called him Danny. Before I tell you what Danny said to Keanu on that bench, you need to know who Maria Elena Vasquez was. Because the woman who gave that coat away wasn't a saint. She was just exhausted, and she was running out of time herself, and she didn't have it in her to walk past somebody who looked the way Keanu looked. Her story is the other half of this one. Maria Elena was 29. She'd grown up in Boyle Heights, the oldest of 4, and she'd been working some kind of job since she was 14. Right now, she was working too. Until 3 weeks ago, she'd been a housekeeper at the Vermilion Crest, the same hotel Keanu had just walked out of. Although she didn't know that yet, she'd been on the morning crew, 12 rooms per shift, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. She was good at her job, the kind of good where you notice a guest's allergy medication on the nightstand, and you remember to leave an extra glass on the bedside the next morning. The supervisor, a woman named Patricia, had been quietly putting her up for a promotion. 3 weeks ago, a guest in Suite 1104 had lost a wedding ring. Maria Elena found it under the corner of the box spring while she was changing the sheets. She brought it down to the front desk. The front desk manager, a woman named Bridget Halloway, took it from her, smiled, and said she'd see it returned. Maria Elena went back to work. 2 days later, the guest called the hotel asking about the ring. Bridget told the guest the housekeeping staff hadn't found anything. Then Bridget called Maria Elena into her office and fired her for theft, said the ring had been turned in by another employee who'd seen Maria Elena pocketing it. There was no other employee. There was no ring on file. The ring was in Bridget's purse. Maria Elena tried to argue. Bridget said if she didn't leave quietly, the hotel would file a report with the LAP. Maria Elena had no severance, no warning, and no way to fight it without a lawyer. And she couldn't afford a lawyer. She walked out of the Vermilion Crest at 4:18 on a Tuesday afternoon and stood on the sidewalk for almost 20 minutes before she could remember which way the bus stop was. So she'd taken a second shift at El Cholo on Weston, waiting tables from 4 in the afternoon to closing. Her son Danny was at her mother Rosa's apartment in Echo Park during those hours, drawing or watching TV or sleeping on the couch. Danny had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia at 3. He'd been in remission once and out of it twice. He was supposed to start a new round of chemotherapy in 2 weeks. The full treatment course, with a possible bone marrow transplant his oncologist had warned might be coming, was going to cost us something in the range of $420,000. Medi-Cal would cover about 60%. Maria Elena had applied to 7 different foundations. 6 had said no. 1 had said yes for $9,000, which felt like a miracle and was also nothing. The 7th foundation, the one she'd had the most hope for, was called the Patricia Taylor Foundation. Children's Hospital Los Angeles had recommended it. Dr. Morrison, Danny's oncologist, had written the supporting letter himself. The application had taken her 4 nights to fill out because she kept stopping to check the wording. She'd cried when she sealed the envelope because she let herself believe. 2 weeks ago, the rejection letter had come. Insufficient eligibility criteria. No appeal. She hadn't told her mother. She hadn't told anybody. She'd folded the letter into a square and put it in the kitchen drawer where she kept the bills she couldn't pay. She kept thinking about it at strange times, standing at the bus stop, pouring coffee at El Cholo, tucking Danny in at night. The phrase insufficient eligibility ran through her head like a song she didn't want stuck. Tonight, the night of the coat, she'd just finished her shift at El Cholo. She'd picked Danny up from Rose's. They were walking to the bus stop on La Brea because she'd missed the earlier one. And she didn't want to wait inside the bodega because Danny was almost asleep on his feet. And she wanted to keep moving. That's when Danny saw the old man. He pulled away from her, no warning, walked right up to the bench. Maria Elena's heart jumped because she was a mother in Los Angeles. And you don't let your 7-year-old walk up to strangers. But the way Danny was walking wasn't fear. It was curiosity. And she was 3 steps behind him already. "Are you cold, sir?" Keanu looked up. The first thing he saw wasn't the boy's face. It was the boy's mouth. There was a bluish tint around the lips. Faint but there, the kind of color a parent learns to watch for. Cyanosis. Keanu had spent enough hours in pediatric oncology waiting rooms to know what that color meant in a child. Reduced oxygen. Something wrong with the blood. Danny didn't notice Keanu looking. He just kept going. "My mama says nobody should be cold if we can help." Maria Elena was already pulling off her coat by the time she reached them. She moved fast, like she didn't want to give herself time to think about it. The coat was old. The zipper got stuck halfway up. She draped it across Keanu's shoulders. "Oh no," Keanu started, "Miss, please. I've been colder than this, sir. You take it. You need it more than I do." She stood there, soaked through her thin black shirt, rubbing Danny's shoulders to keep him warm. Her teeth weren't chattering, but they would be in about 3 minutes. Keanu could see her making the math in her head, trying to figure out how long the wait for the bus was, whether the bus had heat. "What's your boy's name?" he asked. "Danny," she said. "Daniel, he's 7. He's a good kid. He's the best." She didn't say anything else for a second. Then she said, quietly, almost to herself, "He's the best kid I know." There was a shelter on Fountain, she told him, about 4 blocks north. They'd take him in for the night if he could make it that far. The number 212 bus came up the block a minute later, hissing through the wet pavement. "Bye, mister," Danny called over his mother's shoulder as she scooped him up. "I hope you get warm." The doors closed. The bus pulled away. Keanu sat alone on the bench wearing a Goodwill coat that smelled like fryer oil and a child's shampoo. He pulled it tighter across his shoulders. It was thin. It was worn. It was the warmest thing he'd felt against him in a long time. He took out his phone. The one number he called wasn't his lawyer, wasn't his manager. It was Helen Brennan, the woman who'd been his personal assistant for 22 years, and who, besides Keanu himself, was the only person on Earth who knew exactly what the Patricia Taylor Foundation actually did. "Helen," he said, "I need you to do something for me. Tonight, there's a boy I just met. Mother's name was Maria Elena. Boy was about 7. He's sick, Helen. I could see it on him. I'll start the search. Pull every rejection the Foundation issued in the last 6 months. Everyone. And Helen, I want to know who signed off on them." He hung up. He sat there a little longer, the rain easing off into a mist. He thought about Kim. He thought about a hotel ballroom on Sunset, where Vincent Ashford Whitmore III had once given a speech about excellence in hospitality, and gotten a standing ovation from a room of 200 people in cocktail dresses. For the first time in weeks, Keanu Reeves smiled. The next morning, Helen called at 5:47. She didn't bother with hello. The family you're looking for. The boy's name is Daniel Vasquez. His application was rejected by the foundation on January 22nd. The form lists insufficient eligibility, but the kid's oncologist filed a supporting letter that should have moved him to immediate approval. Someone overrode the recommendation. Who? Roland signed it, but there are 204 other rejections in the same window, and the pattern is consistent. Cases with high projected treatment costs. Roland was filtering by dollar amount, not need. Keanu sat at the edge of his bed and didn't say anything for a long time. There's more, Helen said. The hotel terminated a housekeeper 3 weeks ago. Maria Elena Vasquez. Theft allegation. Same woman. Keanu closed his eyes. Pull the security footage from the 11th floor for the week of January 11th. Through 15th, he said. All of it. Get me the original incident report from Bridget Halloway. Get me a forensic accountant in by noon. And Helen, don't tell Roland anything. Not yet. He got dressed. Same hoodie, same jeans, same boots. He went down to the kitchen and made coffee in a stovetop percolator, the way his mother had taught him 40 years ago, and he stood at the window, watching the canyon road dry off, and he thought about a 7-year-old boy on a bus stop bench whose lips had been the wrong color. By noon, the forensic accountant, a woman named Patricia Vega, who'd worked white-collar cases for the FBI for 16 years before going private, had found the first thread. By the next afternoon, she had the whole sweater. $4.2 million had been moved out of the foundations in the last 18 months through a series of shell companies. The trail ran through Delaware, through a holding firm in Belize, and into a personal account in the Cayman Islands, held under the name of Vincent's wife's maiden name. Vincent had not told his wife. 2 days later, Danny collapsed. It was a Wednesday morning, 10:43, and he was at his desk at Hoover Street Elementary, coloring in the wings of a paper airplane when he just slid sideways and didn't catch himself. His teacher, Mr. Devlin, was there in 4 seconds. Danny's pulse was racing and his skin was cold. The school nurse called 911. The ambulance took him to Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. By the time Maria Elena got there, she'd been changing sheets at her new job at a motel on Olympic, and she'd run a mile and a half before she remembered she could call a lift. Danny was in the pediatric ICU, and his oncologist doctor, Morrison, was waiting in the hallway with the kind of face doctors put on when they have to deliver bad news in a way that doesn't sound like bad news. Miss Vasquez, Danny's white cell count has spiked. The leukemia is no longer in remission. We need to start aggressive chemotherapy within 48 hours, and based on his marrow biopsy from last month, I'm now recommending we move directly to bone marrow transplant as soon as we have a donor match. How much? Maria Elena said. Her voice came out flat. She'd already done this math 100 times in her sleep. The full treatment plan, Dr. Morrison said gently, is going to run somewhere between $420,000 and $470,000. Medi-Cal will cover 60%. Your remaining obligation after the smaller grants you've secured is approximately $160,000. We can't begin without confirmation of payment plan for that balance. Maria Elena nodded. She kept nodding. Her hands were doing something strange at her sides, opening and closing, like they were trying to grab onto something that wasn't there. The doctor said something else. She didn't hear it. She walked to the hallway window. Outside, the parking structure. Inside her purse, a card she'd forgotten about. Black cardstock, dense and heavy, with a phone number embossed in silver and the words, Patricia Taylor Foundation. A man at a bus stop had pressed it into her hand 2 nights ago without her noticing. She'd thought it was trash. She pulled out her phone. She dialed the number. A woman answered on the first ring.
Vasquez residence.
Yes, this is Maria Elena Vasquez. Mrs. Vasquez, this is Helen Brennan. Reeves has been waiting for your call. He's going to be at the hospital in 26 minutes. Please don't leave. Maria Elena's knees went. She caught herself against the window. Who is Mr. Reeves? Helen paused. Then, very gently, he's the man on the bench, Mrs. Vasquez. The one you gave your coat to. 24 minutes later, Keanu Reeves walked through the front doors of Children's Hospital Los Angeles in the same hoodie, the same jeans, the same boots. Beside him, a tall man in a charcoal suit carrying a leather portfolio, James Okonkwo, his attorney for 19 years. Behind them, Helen. The receptionist looked up. Took half a second then, her hand went to her mouth. He smiled the way he always did when somebody recognized him on the street. Soft, a little apologetic, like he was the one inconveniencing them. I'm here for the Vasquez family. Maria Elena was in the pediatric ICU waiting area. She'd been sitting in the same plastic chair for an hour. Her mother, Rosa, was beside her, hands clasped, lips moving in Spanish that nobody else in the room could hear. When Maria Elena saw him walking down the corridor, she stood up, but she couldn't make her body do anything else. He was the same man, the same gray-streaked beard, the same tired eyes. He was also, somehow, Keanu Reeves. Mrs. Vasquez, he said, I'm sorry, I owe you an explanation. She tried to say something. Nothing came out. Can we sit down? They sat. James Okonkwo opened the portfolio. He started reading, calmly, like he was reading a grocery list. Keanu Charles Reeves, sole majority shareholder, the Vermilion Crest Holdings, LLC. Patricia Taylor Foundation, founder and sole funding source, 14 consecutive years. As of 9:47 this morning, the foundation's board has been formally dissolved by majority shareholder action. All grant rejections issued in the last 18 months are to be reviewed and reversed where warranted within 72 hours. He looked up at Maria Elena, including your sons. Maria Elena put her face in her hands. Rosa was holding her shoulders. Helen had quietly pulled a tissue from her bag and was holding it without offering it yet. I want to say something, Keanu said. He waited until Maria Elena looked at him. I built this foundation because my sister Kim was sick for a long time. And I used to sit in rooms like this one, and I remember what it felt like when nobody was coming. 2 nights ago, you walked up to a man you didn't know, and you gave him a coat you couldn't afford to give away. You didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything from me. You were just cold yourself, and you did it anyway. He paused, his voice caught. The reason your son was rejected, ma'am, is that someone I trusted has been stealing from the foundation, from kids like yours. I didn't catch it. Should have. That's on me, and I'm sorry. Maria Elena said the only thing she could say. Just save my son. He's already saved, Keanu said. We're paying for everything. Treatment, recovery, travel for the donor. Lost wages for you for the next 2 years so you can be with him. That's not a favor. That's what the foundation is for. He stood up. He set something on the chair beside her. Maria Elena looked down. It was her coat. Cleaned, dried, folded. I had it dry cleaned, he said. I should give it back. I'm not going to need it anymore. That night, Maria Elena sat in the chair beside Danny's bed in the pediatric ICU. The chemotherapy had started at 6. They'd given him 3 different drugs through a central line in his chest and a 4th one in his arm, and a thing that looked like an ice pack across his forehead for the nausea. He was awake. He kept asking her questions about whether the medicine would make him strong. He asked if he could be strong enough to play soccer at recess by next year. She told him yes. Around midnight, he fell asleep. Maria Elena didn't. She sat in the chair and held his hand and listened to the monitor and counted the seconds between the slow, steady beeps, the way she'd counted seconds her whole life. The waiting room down the hall was empty. The vending machine hummed. A nurse came in once to check the IV and didn't say anything. The room was warm. For the first time in 3 years, Maria Elena could not feel the cold place in her chest that had been there since the day of Danny's first diagnosis. It was just gone, like somebody had reached in and lifted it out. She thought about the man at the bus stop. She still couldn't quite hold both halves of him in her head at the same time. Shaking old man in the soaked hoodie. The man with the leather portfolio who said he was sorry. They were the same person. They were not the same person. She wasn't sure which one was the real one. Maybe both, she thought. Maybe that was the whole point. What happened over the next 8 months, you can read about online if you want. Some of it was in the Los Angeles Times. Some of it was on the morning shows. Most of it, Keanu refused to comment on. Vincent Ashford Whitmore III was removed as CEO of the Vermilion Crest within 72 hours. He held a press conference on the sidewalk outside his lawyer's office in Century City. He stood at a portable podium in a $4,000 suit and told the cameras that he had done nothing wrong, that he had been protecting standards in an industry that had lost its way, and that the real victims here were the shareholders of fine hospitality everywhere. He used the phrase woke standards 3 times. He did not apologize. The Department of Justice took an interest in the foundation's financial irregularities about 2 weeks later. Roland Pemberton flipped almost immediately and tried to put the whole thing on Vincent. Vincent, in his second press conference, said Roland was a desperate man making desperate accusations. He still did not apologize. In May, 3 former Vermilion Crest guests went public with their own stories. The first was a 67-year-old widow named Dolores Whitfield. Her husband, a retired Marine, had taken her to the Vermilion Crest every year on their anniversary for 31 years. The first anniversary after he died, she'd come anyway, alone, wearing the cardigan he'd bought her on their honeymoon. She'd sat in the lobby for 15 minutes, waiting for her table at the restaurant, when Bridget Halloway sent a security guard over to escort her out. The guard told her, politely, that her attire didn't meet the lobby aesthetic. Dolores had walked back to her car and sat in the driver's seat and cried for almost an hour before she could drive home. She'd never told anyone. She told the Times reporter she was telling now because she didn't want it to happen to anyone else's grandmother. The second was a Methodist minister named Marcus Holloway. He'd come to the Vermilion Crest in March of 2023 for an interfaith conference. He was on the second floor with his 16-year-old son when the head of hotel security, a former LAPD officer named Marcus Fairbanks, stopped him in front of the elevator bank and patted him down, in front of his son, in front of 40 other conference attendees. Fairbanks told him later that he'd matched the description of someone who'd been reported acting suspiciously. There was no report. Holloway had filed a complaint at the time. Bridget Halloway had buried it. The third was a former Vermilion Crest housekeeper named Teresa Boyle. She'd worked at the hotel for 9 years. A pot of boiling pasta water had tipped onto her in the staff kitchen in 2022 and left a curved pink scar along her left cheek. 3 weeks after she came back from medical leave, Vincent had her fired. The termination paperwork said her appearance no longer met the hotel's brand standards. Teresa had 3 kids. She lived in her car for 4 months before she found a place at a shelter in El Monte. There were others, a lot of others. The class action filed by 47 former employees, mostly housekeeping and kitchen staff, mostly Latina women, settled for $12.4 million. Vincent's lawyers tried to claim he hadn't personally signed the termination forms. The forms had his initials on them. In August, a federal grand jury indicted Vincent on charges of wire fraud and money laundering. The Cayman account had been traced. The wife's maiden name on the holding company had been traced. Patricia Vega's forensic work was a thing of beauty, the prosecutor said, off the record. The trial took 9 days. Vincent took the stand. He spoke for almost 2 hours about the death of refinement in American hospitality. He compared himself more than once to a man defending a museum from vandals. The jury came back in 4 hours. 11 years federal prison. Restitution of $7.1 million he did not have. His wife, Cordelia, filed for divorce the day after the verdict. The house in Bel Air was foreclosed on. The cars were repossessed. From a holding facility in Lompoc, Vincent began writing a memoir. He sent the first chapter to 17 publishing houses. None of them wrote back. The chapter was titled Unrepentant. But that's the part of the story you can find in the news. There's a part you can't find. It happened in March, on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, in a visitation room at the Federal Correctional Institution in Lompoc. A woman walked in. She was 29 years old, in a navy blazer, with a name tag still pinned to her chest because she'd come straight from work. Her son was in school. He was doing well. The transplant had taken. She'd told her mother where she was going, but she hadn't told anyone else. Vincent Ashford Whitmore III sat across the plexiglass from her. He'd lost weight. His hair, which used to be the kind of gray you have to pay for, had gone white. His prison jumpsuit didn't fit his shoulders the way his suits used to. He looked at her through the plexiglass. He didn't recognize her at first. Then he did. "You worked at my hotel." "Yes," Maria Elena said. "I don't know why you're here." Maria Elena had thought about this for a long time. She'd thought about what she was going to say. She'd written it down once and then thrown the paper away. She didn't need the paper. "I came to tell you my son's name," she said. "You signed off on a letter that said he didn't qualify. I came to tell you his name so you'd have to hear it from somebody." Vincent's jaw tightened. He started to say something. She kept going. "Daniel Andres Vasquez. He's 8 now. He had leukemia. He almost died because of paperwork that you signed. I'm not here to yell at you. I'm not here to forgive you. I just wanted you to hear his name out loud one time, from his mother." Vincent looked at the floor. He looked at her. He looked at the floor again. The first time he opened his mouth, nothing came out. The second time he said something so quiet, the camera microphone almost missed it. The court transcripts from his appeal, which would surface a year later, captured it. "I didn't know they were real," he said. Maria Elena waited. "The kids," he said. "The names. They were files. They were dollar amounts. I didn't think about it." She stood up. "I forgive you," she said. "I want you to know that. Not because you deserve it, because I'm not going to carry you around anymore." She walked out. She didn't look back. Vincent sat in the visitation room for another 20 minutes before the guard came to get him. The official prison log notes that he asked for paper and a pencil that night. Whatever he wrote, no publisher ever printed it. But his sister-in-law, the one who'd kept in touch when his wife and his lawyer and his friends had not, said in a magazine interview the next year that Vincent had finally, in his 6th month inside, stopped using the phrase woke standards. He had started, she said, using the words "I was wrong" instead. She said it like she still wasn't sure she believed it. 6 months after Maria Elena's visit, on a Tuesday afternoon in the second week of December, Keanu walked into the lobby of what used to be the Vermilion Crest Hotel. The hotel had a new name now, carved in slate, above the front entrance, the Kim Reeves House. The lobby looked the same on first glance, marble floors, and a chandelier the size of a small car. But if you looked closer, you could see the things that had changed. The dress code signs were gone. The minimum nightly rate had dropped from $1,450 to $420. The hotel ran at a loss now, on purpose. Every dollar of the loss was an investment in the foundation, which had tripled in size, and was funding the treatment of 412 children in its first reformed year. At the front desk, in a navy blazer with a name tag that read Director of Family Liaison, Maria Elena Vasquez was helping a young couple with a sick daughter fill out an intake form. She looked up when Keanu came in. She smiled at him the way you smile at family. Danny was in school. He was in 2nd grade. His most recent scan was clean. The bone marrow transplant in May had taken. His hair was growing back, dark and thick, and he had a habit of running his fingers through it, like he wasn't sure it was real. Keanu walked across the lobby. He didn't go to the elevators. He went to the side door that opened onto Sunset, and he stepped outside. It was a clear day. No rain. A little cold for Los Angeles, but not the kind of cold that gets into your bones. He walked east, past the valet stand, past the bus stop on La Brea, where the same bench sat under the same plexiglass. Shelter, he stopped there. He sat down. A man was sitting on the bench already, older than Keanu, maybe 70, wearing a windbreaker that had been mended at one elbow. He had a paper cup of coffee in his hands, and he was looking at nothing in particular. "Cold today," Keanu said. "Little bit," the old man said. They sat there for a while, not saying anything else. A bus came. The old man stayed. Another bus came, so did Keanu. After a long time, the old man stood up and tipped his cup toward Keanu in a small salute and walked off down the sidewalk. Keanu watched him go. He stayed on the bench. He pulled the hood of his sweatshirt up against the wind. He thought about his sister and his mother, and a boy with the wrong color in his lips, and a woman who'd given away her only coat on a night when she'd had nothing else. He thought about all the people who walked past this bench every day, the 1,000 strangers a week. and how any one of them might be the next person to do the harder thing, or the next person to need somebody to do it for them. You couldn't tell by looking. That was the lesson he kept relearning. You couldn't ever tell. He sat there until the sun started going down, and the streetlights came on along Sunset, and somewhere a few blocks over, a child was getting tucked into bed by a mother who'd just gotten home from work. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it meant something to you, share it with one person tonight. The world doesn't change because of speeches. It changes because somebody, somewhere, looks at a stranger on a bus stop bench and decides to do the harder thing. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And remember, the smallest kindness you offer today might be the one that saves a life you'll never know about. Take care of each other out there.